All right, what is up, YouTube? Welcome back. This is going to be the one video that you need to watch to know what you should be bringing to the seasonals. Seasonals is this weekend, just a couple days left, and we're going to go over just some of the most likely to be seen lineups and what you can be bringing to increase your chance of doing well at the seasonals. If you don't know, the best decks right now in the meta basically are Aphelios P and Z. This is going to be the Winding Light deck with Aphelios. It's just very strong at ending the game. It's basically an aggro deck. But it also has value options. It's very strong right now. It's going to be like number one. Number two is probably going to be Thralls. Thralls is very good at beating Aphelios P and Z. Ravine is just very strong. And still, it's, as it turns out, putting out a bunch of 8/8s, despite being nerfed, still pretty strong. The other ones are going to be Nami TF is a very strong, consistent deck that's very difficult to play, but it beats Aphelios. And the last deck that's sort of come up over the last week is going to be Auction Renekton. Auction Renekton is a Papercraft deck. You sort of rely on throwing Papercraft onto your Ruin Runner, onto your Renekton, and just sort of OTKing your opponent. It's a deck that only came up in like the last week, but it's been very strong and very difficult to deal with, and sort of doesn't have real counters right now. So as we're going through these lineups, you're probably going to see that deck come up quite a bit. But yeah, let's go ahead and start going through our lineups here. Okay, so our first lineup here is going to be a little bit weird. It's not a straight up lineup. I'm going to throw 5 decks at you here, and basically you can pick 3 of them and just sort of whichever ones you like the most. Because to be honest, all of them sort of fit together and are very strong. This is sort of going to be the most common lineups that you'll see is just some sort of combination of these 5 decks. The idea here is that these decks are all really good, or pretty good into Aphelios, into Nami, banning Thralls or banning Auction Renekton. So first up, Auction Renekton should probably be in your lineup. This is such an incredibly consistent OTK deck that a lot of decks just can't deal with. Even your really bad matchups that include like freezes, you know, we're talking like Ash LeBlanc is one of your few like hard counters. It's a deck that nobody's gonna be bringing. And if they do bring it, like they're bringing Ash fucking LeBlanc. Like, come on. But this deck has game into almost anything. Even the bad matchups, sometimes you just OTK them and it doesn't matter. It is going to be a pretty normal list that you're looking at here. It's, of course, running Auction Renekton, triple Papercraft, triple Ruin Runner. Interesting text here. I have Stress Defense in here. Stress Defense is really nice in the mirror because it can't be denied like Wallop, and it's really good into the Papercraft turns because you just sort of slow your opponent down and stop them from OTKing you for one turn, which can matter a lot. Otherwise, this is pretty standard. You're probably going to see this deck come up a few times as we go through this video. This deck is very strong. You should probably be playing it. Second deck here of the 5 is going to be that PNZ Aphelios. This one is with Victor in it. So notably, Victor is very good into the mirror. So if you're not banning PNC Aphelios, you should probably be running the Victor version. Because if you're going to be playing the mirror, it's very good in that. This Victor version is also better into Thralls. So if for some reason you have to leave Thralls up, Victor's kind of nice at making it a little bit easier on you. But either way, it's sort of the Winding Light deck that you've seen all season long. You just sort of use your Lunari Deathbringers to cheat out Winding Light on either 6 or 7 and just get a wide board of Overwhelm. You have a ton of burn to finish it off. This one is running Celestial Trifecta sort of as your 40th card that gives you a little bit of extra value. You know, it's draw 3. It can't be that bad, right? As well as a Moonlight Affliction. Moonlight Affliction is very good as a hush against like these Auction Renekton decks to deny them Overwhelm. Otherwise, it's very good as a proactive tool just to push a little bit of damage. Because if you're pushing damage in the early game, it's very difficult for your opponent to sort of survive with how much burn we have. This deck is very strong, and also one you should probably be running no matter what you're doing. These 2 decks are so incredibly strong that I would almost certainly include them in my lineup. Third up is going to be Nami TF. Nami TF is very strong, is able to create massive boards with Nami, as well as having a ton of control tools, like the triple Vile Feast, like the triple Tentacle Slam, like the Ruination, to hold your opponent back and make yourself able to make it through the early and mid games. This deck is incredibly strong, but very difficult to play. With only a couple days left, if you don't already have a ton of games on this deck, you probably shouldn't bring it, but it's very strong. It's one you need to be aware of. I think that it doesn't have a ton of super hard target or super hard targeted matchups. Even its bad matchups, it can win, especially if you're running Ruination. I think an option for you, if you aren't going to be banning like Demacia or you're worried about Demacia, you could run second Ruination, and that's just going to help you out. Otherwise, I think this deck is really strong. These are sort of like the first 3 decks that I think are really strong and can be thrown together. This is sort of going to be the main decks that everybody's looking at. But I'm going to give you 2 more decks that you can sort of throw in here if you're more comfortable with them. They're also very strong. First up is going to be Scouts. I think Scouts is actually really well positioned into this meta. It's pretty solid into TF Nami. It's all right into Akshan Renekton. It's all right into the Anti-Aphelios deck. It's okay into the Thralls. It's not like a great matchup. But right now, the Scouts is sort of a deck that doesn't have really bad matchups. Most of its matchups are between like 48 and 55%. If you're comfortable with this deck is very strong. Notice in this one, we are running triple Inspiring Light, which might look a little bit funny, but Inspiring Light on these wide boards is incredibly strong, especially with Island Navigator and Mirai Warden. The whole point of this deck is to just go wide, and then you can either win through Misfortune, or you can win through these big board buffs. So it's either going to be Inspiring Light or For Demacia off of Vanguard Sergeant. And this isn't your Scouts of old. I know Scouts used to be like a draw MF or lose the game type of deck, and this one is not that. It's able to win a lot without MF, and oftentimes Island Navigator is a better card in this deck. It has Zap to be able to consistently be drawing you your buff spells that are going to be kind of nice, as well as a Shell Shocker. Shell Shocker looks a little bit funny. It just helps out your mana curve sometimes. That way you can cast this Inspiring Light on turn 4 or turn 5 as you need. Otherwise, yeah, I think this deck is really strong, and if you're comfortable on Scouts, play it, because I think it's a really consistent deck. And then number 5 is just going to be playing Thralls. Thralls is just a really strong deck that's hard to deal with. It's very good into Aphelios. It's pretty solid into Nami. I think you're beating basically every bad Nami player. I think it's only among like the best Nami players that you're going to have trouble with. In general, I think this deck is really good. Couple techs that we have here. We have one Buried Nice. Buried Nice is very good against Demacia. It's also pretty solid into the Mirror. If you're running this and you are going to be playing into Mirror, Harsh Winds is actually really good. It helps you when you both have Thralls coming at each other to get favorable trades that your opponent just can't really deal with. It's also pretty solid into these Akshan or Nectin decks, just having the extra freezes. If you don't like Harsh Winds, or if you're going to be banning the Mirror, you can go up to Three Sisters or another Quicksand. Feel pretty good about yourself. Some people are cutting Avalanche. I think in tournament setting, you should be on at least one. That way your opponent has to kind of play honest. They can't just keep developing into you just in case you have the Avalanche. But yeah, this deck, very strong. I think of these 5 decks, my lineup is probably going to end up being Akshan Renekton, Aphelios, and then either Nami TF or Scouts. It just kind of depends. Nami TF is a very difficult deck to play, and it's definitely one that over 9 rounds is going to really, be taxing on you mentally. So Scouts is going to be a little bit easier, a little bit more straightforward. Either way, though, I think this is going to be like the base lineup. It's just very strong into most things, and this is going to be where most people start. Our second lineup here is going to be a little bit more targety. This is going to be a lineup that's targeting Thralls, targeting Nami, targeting small Demacia like Scouts, and is also fine into Papercraft. So let's go and take a look at that. You're going to see another Akshan Renekton. I told you this deck is really strong. You should probably be running it. Akshan Renekton is going to be the first deck. Second deck is Poppy Taric. Now, you might be wondering, where's Poppy Bard? Poppy Bard is a very strong deck, but sometimes has issues ending games. This Poppy Taric deck doesn't have issues with that. It basically gets on board, makes really big things, either through the Sojourners or through just rallying multiple times with Taric. It's a very difficult deck to deal with if you're not prepared for it. It's very good into Nami. It's very good into Thralls. So if that's sort of the direction you want to go, with this, I think this is a very strong deck. Third deck that you would be running is Alawi Ionia. Now, this is a list that I stole directly from Infinipatrons. Infinipatrons and Grandpa Roji have been the big sort of pioneers of this deck. And they feel very good about its position into the meta right now. The big strengths, this deck is absolutely crushing Thralls. It is incredibly strong. Thralls has a lot of trouble dealing with your tentacles, as well as with all these protection spells. It's a very difficult matchup to deal with. The other strength that this has is it's very good into other Demacia decks. Between Tentacle Smash and your big tentacles just absolutely taking over the board, it's so difficult for other Demacia decks to deal with you. If you want a little bit more of, like a different peek at the meta, you're targeting more of these Thralls types of decks, then this is definitely an option for you. Issue with this lineup, you're not great into Aphelios, you're not super great into it, so it's one you kind of have to worry about, but otherwise, I think it's a really solid option. The third lineup is going to be hard targeting Anti-Aphelios. You just really do not want to see that deck. If you see it, you just want to crush it. This lineup isn't as strong as the other ones, and very much is a comfort type of lineup. If you aren't comfortable on these decks, if you really don't want to just like hard target Anti-Aphelios, probably shouldn't be running it. But I wanted to give an option for people who want to play a little bit more control-y. We are running back the Thralls deck. Thralls, of course, very good against Anti-Aphelios, especially because of Ravine. Blight Ravine just absolutely crushes the deck. The second deck is going to be FTR. FTR is another Blighted Ravine deck that runs Vile Feast and runs Withering Wail, and is very good against Anti-Aphelios. It's farming that matchup. You're a little bit weaker into, like the big Demacia decks like Poppy Taric. You do run Ruination, so you're able to deal with those most of the time. But FTR is sort of it's definitely an off-meta deck. Statistically, it's also very good into TF Nami. And Thralls is also like pretty solid into TF Nami, so you're pretty fine playing into stuff like that. It's definitely an option for you. Third deck here would just be Jaceheimer. Jaceheimer has sort of low-key been this really strong tournament deck for a couple months now. It's also an option to be thrown into that first lineup if you really want to, but it's beating Anti-Aphelios and it's beating Demacia, which is sort of what you're looking at with this lineup. I think it's definitely an option. It's strong decks. This deck's a little bit difficult and a little bit clunky to play, but once you get the playstyles down, it can definitely do well for you. Either way, again, I think my lineup is probably going to end up being Auction or Nectin, Anti-Aphelios, and then either Nami TF or Scouts. We'll have to see. But either way, I feel pretty good about these. I think these lineups are really strong. I think we are kind of in a meta where there isn't a ton of diversity, which is to say that the strong decks are so strong that it's hard to actually bring something that isn't just straight up the strong decks. Especially stuff like Auction or Nectin just feels like it's hedging the meta in such a way that it's so difficult to bring random stuff this time around. But either way, let me know what decks you want to run. And yeah, all of the deck codes will be linked in the description below. Good luck in Seasonals.